Thanks for being here. Sarah, I'm sure that there's a number of mommies on here that are balancing, kids at home and everything. So we totally got it. And I'm just so happy you were able to join. Okay, Ilissa, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Thanks. Sounds good. So I'm going to skip over this and just have us look at what we are going to chat about today. So as Stefanie said, feel free to use the chat box if you have questions as we go. The intent is that we have time for questions at the end. But again, if it relates to what we're talking about as we're in it, feel free to send it via chat, or you can just speak up. There's not a ton of us here. So let us know as we go. The three key areas we're going to talk through are fundraising, event leadership, and production. These are really the three big pieces of ensuring that you can host a successful virtual event. And, we're really just going to share through the clients that we've worked with, what works, what doesn't, how things, have changed. It's definitely evolving. What we've seen work, back March, April, May is different than what might be working now, and things are constantly changing. And what's most important, of course, is that you're able to identify what's going to work best for you and your organization. So a lot of these things, of course, you should take into account, best practices, etc. But at the end of the day, you have to choose what's right for you. So these are the questions we would love for you to put your answers into the chat box. What are you looking to get out of this webinar? And what dialogue have you had about virtual events? So if you don't have an answer, that's fine. But if you have had any of these conversations or have thought about it, we'd love to kind of know where you're at. Okay. The first thing we want to talk about, which doesn't really fall into any of those three categories, but is super important in planning any event, is setting a timeline. So I'm certain a lot of these bullet points will look very familiar, but just worth running through as we talk through this. So you want to set your timeline starting from your event date and then work backwards from there to ensure that you have enough time to get everything accomplished. A virtual or an in-person event can be pulled together and executed on short notice. I will add the caveat of the next bullet point, which is having a longer runway is beneficial in many ways, particularly fundraising. You want a longer runway no matter what. It's easier to put together a program and a video in a short period of time, but to have that longer period for fundraising and reaching out to your donors and planning appropriately definitely will help you and your event to be more successful. We recommend breaking your timeline down by category, whether it's admin tasks, fundraising, program, video, invitations, communications, whatever makes sense for you, but it helps to keep it a little more organized. And then insert dates based on what makes sense for you and your team. So think about what's going to take the longest and plan for those, and then try to get pieces accomplished that won't take as much time so you can cross them off your list. Even if they're further out, just kind of look ahead occasionally and see if there's anything that's, will take you a short period of time that you can get done sooner. And then we always recommend looking at your timeline 2 weeks out. That allows you to plan and just be prepared for what's coming up as well. Any timeline questions before we move into fundraising?
I know we're going to cover fundraising a little bit more in this regard and go into depth, but the reason also why having a longer runway is beneficial, I'm sure Ilissa's going to touch on this, is that you really need to raise the majority of your funds going into your event. The night of fundraising for a virtual event is much more complicated. Even if you have a text to give, even if you have a silent auction, a live auction, any of those pieces, we are finding that the interest in the virtual events are less and less along the way. People are jumping on or they're signing up for virtual events so that they can either, if if they do watch them the night of, it's a smaller number. A lot of people watch it afterwards on their own time. So your fundraising efforts might not be as large that night. So just be very aware that the majority of what you are going to raise or plan on raising will probably be done that evening. I mean, prior to that evening. So we're really recommending, even I would say even 90 to 95% at this point is really what you want to raise from, sponsorships. If you're going to do ticket sales, but we'll talk about cost of, attending a little bit, but mainly by sponsorship. So we'll cover this in a little bit more detail, but I just wanted to touch on that one piece of the longer runway.
And that is exactly where we are going next. So that works out just fine. So a few bullet points just to get us started. Galas are often the primary source of annual fundraising revenue for many organizations. That might be true for you. If it's not the primary source, it's likely a large source. You can still secure that revenue and enhance donor relationships by hosting a virtual gala. As Stefanie just said, we recommend securing 85 to 90 or even 90 to 95 of your fundraising revenue prior to your event. And the events that we have worked on that have been the most successful have hit this target prior to their program for those reasons that Stefanie just shared. So we want to talk about the importance of your budget. So a defined expense budget, clear revenue targets, the similarities and differences when it comes to fundraising virtual versus in-person. Truthfully, the similarities really do outweigh the differences. You're still going to want to take the I'll say appropriate steps that you do when you have an in-person event, and some opportunities that a virtual event platform provides you. And of course, as I just said, your budget. So thinking through your budget, where we've been kind of asking and recommending everybody start is by taking your budget from years past and looking through that and seeing how you plan for, let's start with revenue, how you plan for revenue. So we'd still recommend going through that same process as you would if it were an in-person event. So you still want to pull your donor list, people who have supported your event in the past, either as sponsors or donors, no matter at what level, people who have purchased tickets, participated in raffles, auctions, whatever revenue opportunities you offer, you want all of those people. And then putting them in a list where you can see what they've done in the past, and then also predict what you think you'll be able to ask them for this year, but also what you think they might commit to this year, which might be two separate things. We see a lot like, I'd like to ask this person for $1,000, call it, and making up that number, but realistically, I think they'll give us $750. So you kind of want both of those numbers, just so you can accurately plan, but also budget. And then that'll also help you set your revenue goals. So if you then can add up, all the people in the sponsor categories, what you're predicting, but then what you think that they'll actually commit to, that'll help you set that budget to know where your revenue will come in from and what's realistic for your event, but also then you can have that to kind of offset the expenses and as well, and see what you'll be able to raise overall. So that would be the recommendation for revenue. As far as expenses go, you want to, of course, evaluate your expenses. You likely will not have the cost of a venue or catering unless you decide to do a hybrid option, which going into winter isn't going to be so popular. But if your event is more in the spring and summer when things start warming up a little bit more, we are talking about that with a number of clients, to have some sort of small outdoor gathering that might go along with your virtual event. But most likely, if your event is coming up soon, you won't have that venue or catering expense, but you will have some additional expenses that you likely haven't had before. So production, and we'll get into that more when we get into production, but having a production team is very, and also an event platform. So depending on what you typically use, some people use their regular website for fundraising for an event. Some people engage in outside one. So it kind of depends what the difference in expense will look like based on what you've done in the past. But there are, which we'll get into again when we talk about production, there are options for platforms that can just fundraise, that can just help you with streaming, or that offer both, depending on what your needs are. Event collateral and design, that likely is something you see anyway. That's your invitations, your save the dates, anything that requires design, printing, and postage. And we are recommending, and I think all of our clients that we worked with so far have sent a paper invitation via mail, and they've actually gotten good response rates with the mail back reply card for securing donations in that way. There are always going to be people, we have found by the success of sending these out, that want to send in a check or send something in via mail as opposed to doing it online. So that has been fairly successful. We talked about production team, your sponsor and donor stewardship packages and giveaways. So this is something, again, you have to decide if it's right for your organization, but a lot of these organizations we're working with have chosen to send something to their higher level sponsors or include like a little something representative of the organization in their acknowledgement letters. So again, whatever works for you, whatever that budget looks like, but that's something to consider as well. Speaker fees. So hopefully if you do engage a speaker who is of more celebrity name or something like that, they'd be willing to donate their time, which many of our clients have been lucky to find that. You know, they're also sitting at home kind of in the same situation. So many have been very generous with their time. So if you can find someone to do that, of course, that is fantastic. So really, that's a good time to use your board, use your connections, see who knows who's connected to who, and if that's important to you, kind of going down that path in that way. Your fundraising video, oftentimes that's something you have anyway, so that's a cost that's likely already in your budget. And then kind of miscellaneous, whatever is specific to your organization that you need to account for. Any questions on budgets? Okay. So the other piece about fundraising that you want to consider is what your fundraising modalities are, right? So we talked about sponsorship and donations, which should be a staple in getting your revenue. As Stefanie mentioned, tickets are a decision. We have not worked with anyone who has charged for tickets, but we have had conversations with people who have charged for tickets. And what they are finding is the reason that we typically haven't been recommending it is that people see the ticket price as a donation. So they're purchasing the ticket, whether it's an amount that they would typically give or not, and then they're maybe not joining and they're maybe not giving another donation that's larger. So it kind of says to people, I'm going to do this and then I don't have to do anything else. That's not to say there isn't a place for it. And that's something you have to decide, you know, based on your audience and your organization. But we've found better fundraising outcomes when registration is required for a ticket so that you can keep track of how many people you might have, but you're not necessarily charging money for it. And then there's the other options, which again, you have to decide what you usually do and what might make sense for your virtual event, which would be a raffle. And then there's silent and live auctions. And then of course your night of fundraising. So raffles have been really successful. because you can allow people to purchase tickets in advance. You have something really exciting. The smaller raffles, you know, 1 item, maybe 2 items of something really exciting, like Emmerman raffled off a Peloton, and that was super successful. So if you can get a high caliber item like that donated, preferably, that's where we've been seeing a lot of success with fundraising. Silent and live auctions have not had as much success. I think silent auctions have been a little more successful just because it allows people to go in advance and kind of make those decisions. But usually what's attractive for auctions are in-person experiences and trips and things that we really are being extra cautious with right now. So without those things as auction items, they just haven't been doing as well. But again, you have to evaluate your community and your group, and if there are items that you have that are still, you know, really good viable options that are available to you that your community would be interested in, then maybe you do still want to consider a silent or live auction. The last piece is your night of fundraising, whether that is a paddle raise or a text to give or just a general ask for donations throughout the program. Again, based on your audience, what fits into your program, what makes the most sense for you. I will say, based on the events we've worked on and the feedback we have received from other organizations we've talked to, is that paddle raises are not working as well as like a text to give or just a dedicated time to generally ask for, excuse me, for donations. And that's because paddle raises really thrive off of the energy in the room and seeing people raise their paddle, and you see your friend doing something and then somebody else doing something. And that's not available to us when you can't see who else is there. Any questions? Okay.
I'm just going to quickly jump in. Ilissa,
Yeah.
There's been a bunch of questions in the chat room. And what I want to say to everybody is we want to get through leadership and production because these are 2 really important areas. But during the Q&A, we will try and cover all of these as much as we can. If not, we can also send out written, you know, answers to these questions as well.
Sounds good. Yeah, I saw them coming in, but I did not pop them out, so thank you. Event leadership. So I will break this down, but just kind of walking through our overview here. What event leadership is necessary? Short answer is none. Longer answer is whatever best benefits your organization. So you've heard me say that a lot already. I'm going to keep saying it. There are definitely best practices to everything. There are things that we have seen work really well, whether it be organizations we've worked with or ones we have, you know, kind of debriefed with after their events. But at the end of the day, you have to choose what works well for you, and that isn't necessarily what works well, you know, for somebody else. Your event leadership can include your board. It should include your board if you're going to have event leadership, an honoree or multiple honorees, a co-chair or multiple co-chairs, and a host committee. And the considerations you want to take into account when you're thinking about your event leadership is the buy-in of your board. That is super important. And then your leadership's commitment to their roles and responsibilities. So the kind of overview of that information is that you, no matter what, are going to be managing this group of people, right? So you want to be able to manage them if they're going to be giving you back what you need out of them, and not just be sending emails to people that nobody's responding to, nobody's doing what you've asked or what they've agreed to. So you just want to make sure everybody's really on the same page. This goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. The more people you have advocating for your organization and your event and spreading the word, the higher likelihood you are to succeed. And that's really where these virtual events offer a really unique opportunity is that you probably have people on your board or are engaged in other ways who have friends or family across the country. You know, we have an organization, multiple organizations who have connections not even in this country. And this offers a really cool opportunity to engage people who can't normally attend your in-person events. So the more people you have spreading the word, just is the more people that you likely have joining or supporting. So that's kind of the first thing. As I touched on for a second already, your board buy-in is huge. Again, based on the events we've worked on, whether they're in person or virtual, but since we're talking about virtual, we'll talk about this year. The ones that have had the strongest board buy-in have been the ones that have been, I'll say, the most successful, but have really exceeded their goals because they have their board members forwarding emails, sharing Facebook posts, talking to their friends, bringing in their own donations or sponsorships, helping staff reach out to people for event donations and sponsorships. So they're not only just part of the, you know, general event leadership, but they also can act as an extension of your staff to help you get things done. Didn't mean to do that, sorry. Your honoree. So the honoree is where you really want to consider your program. Oftentimes honorees have a lot of opinions about the program. And they have certain ways they want to get things done, which is totally appropriate. However, you have to really have a clear idea of what you want your virtual event to look like, and then find an honoree who fits into the flow of that event so it really makes sense, and that they're not trying to take things in, you know, different ways that may feel really good to them, but aren't necessarily benefiting what you and your organization are trying to do. But they are a really nice way to, of course, engage people, bring people to the event, etc. Your co-chairs, you of course have co-chairs who are either connected to your organization or oftentimes connected to the honoree. So again, it depends if you're having an honoree or not, who those co-chairs might be. Same goes for the host committee. Oftentimes that host committee fills with connections to the honoree or the co-chairs. The host committee is a great place for your board. So again, it really just depends what structure works best for you and your organization. The one thing I would absolutely recommend is having role descriptions for each of these different event leadership groups. And that way, from the beginning, when you go and ask them for their participation, you can let them know exactly what you're asking them to do. They have a very clear and visual understanding of exactly what they are being asked and what they're committing to. And then they can either say, yes, I'm comfortable doing this, or no, I'm not, or I'd be willing to help you with A, B, and C, but D, E, and F is not my thing. And then you can have those conversations so you know exactly what to expect, and they know exactly what to expect, and everybody's on the same page, which is how this is generally going to work much more successfully. Any questions? You're
Listen,
muted.
we just had a little discussion on the chat, but just in case. You know, Johnny made a statement that, you know, the paddle raises are successful. You know, that the Immerman found that a paddle raise was harder, a live one. And what I had, you know, responded with is that the board members and the honorees and the co-chairs and the host committees really help ensure that your night of fundraising is successful. So if you don't know if you're going to have board members that are committing that night and or, you know, other, you know, chairs or host committee members that are going to be, you know, participating in your paddle raise or night of fundraising, just be really careful about going public with that, because we're really finding that organizations that have very strong board involvement or committee involvement are helping those organizations reach their goal. So just, you know, that's a very key point, and especially your night of fundraising.
I think that's a really key point kind of across the board, just that's worth making, is all of these things fit together, right? Like your fundraising, of course, is on you and your staff, but having your event leadership is going to help, you know, of course, boost that. Your event production likely is going to help increase your fundraising, because if you have strong event production, people are going to be more compelled to support your mission. So I think that's just a really good point across the board, is that all of these things really do support each other. Okay. Production. So I am guessing, just based on having shared this content before and where the questions come from, that there will likely be questions about this piece, and for good reason, because this is the most uncharted territory, because we don't deal with this for an in-person event, aside from AV, which is pretty, you know, simple, lights, getting the program on the screen, potentially streaming a video. So this looks a little bit different. So what we want to cover is a production company, streaming, storytelling, which is really the bulk of your program, and then engaging viewers. So your production company, you want to choose someone who you feel like you really work with, who is creative, who is with you and understands your mission. And where they're going to help you is with filming. So if you're pre-recording, they're going to help you with that. They can record and edit your fundraising video if you're doing one of those. They can help you with your graphic elements. We'll talk about that in a bit, but just adding in some different exciting things. So it's less focused on having just a speaker, and you're adding some, you know, whether it's a banner or a picture or things like that. And day of support will be really important as well. So that's, you know, why you would want to consider a production company. Streaming, so you want to consider, this is kind of where I touched on earlier, your event platform options. So there are platform options that offer both fundraising and streaming. There are platform options which just offer fundraising, and then there are ones which offer just streaming. So it depends what your budget is and what your needs are. If you're able to do fundraising through your organization's website and just add a events page and do everything through that, then we would recommend just looking at something that can stream for you, like a Zoom. So we've seen organizations do this on Zoom, on YouTube, integrate it with Facebook Live. So there's lots of options if that's for you. If you need a hybrid, there's definitely a lot of hybrid options, which are great. You just have to really do the research to see what's right for you, and if it's offering A, enough for you, or B, if it's offering too much and maybe the cost, you know, really is more than you need to spend based on what you're going to use from the platform. So there's a lot of things to consider there as well, just based on what your needs are. Storytelling. So like I said, this is the bulk of your program. So these are the questions that you kind of want to ask yourself and figure out before you get moving. So do you only plan to use the content for your event, or more broadly? We're kind of seeing a mix of these things. People are definitely slicing and dicing their program. You know, some are for sure putting the whole program online. Some are putting pieces online. Some are saving certain things to use for other, you know, whether it's something for your major donors or pieces like that. So you just have to really plan the content as to what makes sense. And if you are planning on using it more broadly, just making it less event focused and more mission and organization focused. who do you want to tell your story? So, choosing people who are related to your organization, who people can, not to use the same word again, but people who, or someone who people can relate to and invoke certain emotion and really build that connection to make them feel, why they're there, why they're staying on the event, why they're watching, why they are compelled to donate. So those are the people you want to tell your story. What is the look and feel and the theme? So you want to pick a theme from the beginning and really run that throughout. And something I have a little bit further down, but I'll kind of bring it in now, is putting together a run of show. And that way you can put all of the components you're thinking of into, whether it's an Excel document or handwriting them out, whatever works for you, but you can see them visually, and then you can move them around and really start to identify what theme is coming together, whether you have one set from the beginning or if you find that one is kind of taking shape organically once you look at what different components you want. And that's going to just help keep people engaged. If it's too jumping all over the place and you're, talking about your mission and then you're talking about this other program and then you immediately go to some program that you have but doesn't necessarily tie in, it's going to be a little too disengaged for people to keep their attention. And your goal, as I have below, engaging viewers, is to really engage them and keep their attention. So really using that run of show to be able to plan and move components around is going to be really helpful. Sound and visual elements. So again, that goes back to what I mentioned about having graphic elements that aren't just having a speaker. So, Immerman had a performance by someone who was on America's Got Talent, a young woman who had cancer herself. She sang a song that she felt made her feel powerful and got her through some of her toughest times. She shared her story. So if you can have anything like that, that kind of breaks away from just having a speaker, but adds in something interesting and a little bit different, that's great as well. Pictures, video footage, B-roll, all of that makes a huge difference.
And Ilissa, I'm just going to quickly touch on Above and Beyond, the gala that we had on Friday evening. So they decided to make it more like a mini documentary as opposed to a lot of talking heads. We're finding that, when you have people on that are just, talking like we are during this, that people are not really as engaged or excited about the piece. So we're really, how are you presenting yourself? We did, for this particular one, we did some sort of graphic short, which was like filled with a voiceover and graphics and pictures that were all incorporated together. In addition, we ran a theme called Redefining Recovery, and we did like literally 30-second little snippets of a recovery story intermixed with factual information about the organization, intermixed with a very powerful song that one of the clients sang, and we showed beautiful pictures of people smiling. So heavy visuals, heavy things that pull in emotion, really changing things up. And they really, each segment really cannot last for more than 3 to 4 minutes. Otherwise you lose interest. So we're finding short, succinct, powerful punch, different modalities throughout. And as Ilissa said, really no more than 45 minutes for your entire production is probably the biggest sweet spot, is around like 40 to 45 minutes.
Yeah. And I will just say with that comes from experience of doing these virtual events. We have had events under the 30-minute mark. We have had events over the hour mark. And, when they're too short, people are left wanting more, which isn't a terrible thing. But if they want more and you could have given them more, then you kind of should have. And if it's too long, you're just losing people at that point. So, you know, the 40, maybe 35, but really 40 to 45 minutes is really good. And that's also, you know, a good point when you're planning your run of show, is not that you want to anticipate that people are going to jump off, but they might, because all they have to do is close their computer. So really putting the segments that you feel are most important to your organization, that you feel have the biggest impact, that you feel are best leading up to your ask that evening, really putting those front and center, and leaving, not that there's any fluff, but if there's more fluffy segments, putting those towards the end when people might have to drop off. The one piece we haven't really touched on yet is the live versus recorded, which is really important. So again, you have to do what's right for you. As someone who is very type A and has clients who also like to be in control, the one that gives you the most control obviously is having your program recorded. And basically what that looks like is you schedule your speakers, you record them, you ask them to self-record, you have your production team record them, and that way you can just let them talk, right? So you can ask them a question, you can prompt them, you can guide them, and just let them talk, and then you can edit it to what really is most impactful and makes a lot of sense for you. You can also control how long they speak for. You can have them re-record if something doesn't look right, or if they say something that's like, okay, but could be a little bit better. And it just gives you the control night of that their Wi-Fi is not going to go out, or they're not going to have a connectivity issue, or they're not going to say something that you didn't realize they were going to say, and now someone's not happy. So it just gives you a lot of control. There are definitely elements that you might want live, especially if you want someone to keep popping in and saying thank you to people for their donations, or whatever it might be. There are for sure places in this program for live elements, but just something to consider. And we have been recommending pre-recording a lot of it. That is another benefit of your production team, is that they likely have, I will say, because you might have it, I don't. I haven't talked to anybody who does, but they have connectivity capabilities that we typically don't have. So they sit in their office that has like super secure, high level bandwidth, that the chance of them losing connection is close to zero, whereas Wi-Fi is not super reliable. So that's really a huge benefit as well. The other pieces you want to consider, and this kind of ties into your program and keeping things interesting, also what platform you choose, things like that, is what type of interactive elements you might want, if any. You know, if you want people to be able to chat with each other, Zoom is a great option. If you want to be able to do polls or ask trivia questions or anything like that, again, Zoom is a really good option. If you're using more of a traditional fundraising platform where you're able to link your streaming onto the homepage, those options really aren't there anymore. But it might be really important to you to have a super fancy website that looks really nice and you can direct people to one place and have your program streaming there. And that outweighs having these chats or breakout rooms or polling, etc. So just, again, considering what makes the most sense for you. And then just one more thing about streaming, as long as I kind of brought us back there, is the ease of fundraising. And that's going to, of course, be really important. Does it offer the ability to do sponsorships, donations, ticket sales if you choose to do that? Can you run a raffle through it? Can you run an auction through that? So again, I know we're in production talking about these platforms, but you really have to consider the fundraising aspects as well. Any production questions? I know there are questions in the chat. I see them. I just have not looked yet.
No questions, but I do love the idea of polls and trivia. It's very engaging, and people just love to see the outcome of that. So that's a very good point.
Yeah, we have an event coming up in a couple weeks where they are actually using the polls as one of their interactive elements. They have a pre-event Zoom that they're doing for their larger donors, and they're also doing a main program where that will be, they're going to utilize it in both places as well to keep, you know, things interesting in between segments, just offer a little bit of a breather.
Yeah, and especially if you're doing a pre-record for a majority part of it and keeping people engaged, like that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm just getting out of here so that I can look at all of these questions, but feel free to jump in while I'm looking if you have anything you want to know.
We had Ilissa, I can point to, since I've been monitoring, I can bring up a couple of questions that we said that we were going to get to. One, something that we've been talking about, one question from Melissa was, what do you offer in a packet for a sponsor of digital events? Which is a fantastic question. You know, when you have an in-person event, you can seat people in a certain spot. You can, you know, the way you display your sponsors, you can invite them to a VIP event. You know, there's lots of ways to really engage. The reality is there is not a lot of differential when you're planning a virtual event. So we need to get comfortable with that. There are definitely some things that you can do. As Ilissa mentioned, in a couple of weeks, we're having an event, and what we've decided is donors 1,000 and up. It's a brunch event. And so we ordered a beautiful tray of dried fruit. So something that can't spoil, but that they can eat on the morning of. They'll get it a few days in advance, and they'll be able to, you know, enjoy their dried fruit tray that's coming on a beautiful pear-shaped brown, beautiful wood platter. So, you know, those are the types of things. The way that you're listing is still extremely important. You can be listing people, you know, organizations on your invitation. If you do a print invitation, you can list them on your pre-program that we always like to put up as a slideshow listing, you know, our donors and how the donations have come in. One event that we're doing, this event we're doing in a couple of weeks, you know, there is going to be a session ahead of time, a VIP session with a speaker that is going to be live like this. So, you know, people will have an opportunity to interact and ask questions and see each other. So that was something that was really important to this organization. So it's just really about knowing that maybe for each level you're doing something that's, you know, one thing that's a little more unique to that level. But it's not like it is for regular normal events where you have people in person. Is that helpful, Melissa?
That is helpful. You know, because, you know, in the nonprofit world, it's a struggle anyway, sometimes to interest sponsors and donors and all that kind of stuff. So just having this whole new element of, well, I can't really get you in front of people. You know, I was like, pretty much not even thinking about trying to get sponsors because it didn't seem like it would be worth it. But you gave me a couple good ideas, and like the whole slideshow at the beginning and stuff like that. There might be some ways that we can still tout the whole, you know, I can get you in front of 1,000 people.
Don't discount social media either. You know, social media is a huge place where we see a lot of recognition. Twitter just tweeting out like, hey, this organization just made $1,000 donation to us, like keeping the momentum there. You know, we are finding that we've done about 6 of these now. Organizations are reaching their goals. They may not necessarily gross as much, but they are often netting, you know, their goal, if not more, because their expenses are down as well. So, you know, so we are finding that, you know, organizations they're still hitting it. But just really, you have to change your mindset into raising money before your event. That just has to be a major shift in your mindset.
Okay.
Okay, and Jeff, I also pointed out, asked a question about the RSVP rate. I did write an answer
Yeah, I saw
in the chat, but I just wanted to touch on this, that, you know, having a free event increases your rate of registration. It just does. Now, those people might not necessarily join you the night of, but if you send an email out to them, if you send some sort of MailChimp or constant contact post out, we are finding that open rates are high. Our event from Friday night, we had a 35% open rate after we sent out the in click-through rate. So, you know, we are finding that people are still viewing them. It just might not be in their own time. Also, you have much more of a national reach too. If you're posting on social media, if you're posting on Twitter, if you're sending out to a whole base of support of people that have come across nationally or even internationally to attend your event, you have the opportunity to touch so many more people as well. So keep that in mind too, you know, when you're offering a free, you know, event.
And the other thing with that also, sorry, is that if you're not charging, people are more likely to register. So whether they join or not, you're getting their information. They're on your mailing list. They're now getting your emails. They're now seeing your content. So that's also the trade-off as well, is they likely wouldn't register anyway. So you're not making money off that ticket price. But if it's free, then you're at least capturing their information and can maybe engage them in the future.
Absolutely.
Betsy asked, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ilissa, go ahead.
I was going to say, Betsy asked about the small gifts ahead of the event to encourage participation. So that's not what I meant. So I apologize if that's how it came across, but more so for people who have donated, including something in their acknowledgement letter as a thank you. So it wouldn't go to everyone you're inviting, it would go to the people who have supported. So one of the organizations we worked with didn't end up doing this, but they are a cancer research organization and thought about including some sort of nice ribbon to indicate that, you know, someone had donated. One of the events we have coming up, they're doing a webcam cover. So it's like a little tiny dot basically that you put over your webcam little photo button on your laptop, so that if you're not using it, you can close it and it has your logo on it. So basically someone's just staring at your logo all day, every day. So those are the couple that we've seen. I mean, it really could be anything. There's a lot of expensive options. The nice thing about those is that they fit into an envelope and you don't have to pay extra postage. So, you know, like a pen obviously gets a little bulky. You want to keep it so it's light and that it can just fit into the envelope with whatever letter you're sending.
Sometimes, you know, like a sticker, even a lot of people like to put, you know, on your water bottle, you know, stickers for, you know, a cause, or, I mean, my kids love to do this, where they just go online and they even, you know, contact corporations and say, send me your, you know, your sticker. And then they'll get a sticker and they'll put it on their water bottle. So even something as simple as that, too, you know, is often, you know, appealing as well. But yes, I mean, if you're trying to just really send like a thank you to everybody that's participating, something light that can fit into an envelope that you're already sending a thank you note out in is optimal.
Thank you.
And Johnny, thanks for, you know, she's amazing. We spoke with her the other day, and she has a lot of creative ideas. And I'm sure that, you know, a lot of you also have your own, you know, people that do promotional items. Reach out and ask them. They're here to let you know what's popular right now, what's inexpensive, what's easily mailed. There's a lot of resources out there, you know, for all of you. Ask questions, talk to people, find out what they've been doing, watch other virtual events. You know, get ideas, see what you like, what you don't like. I've probably watched over 50 virtual events over the last 8 months, just trying to understand what people are doing and what I like about them. Oh, and I see a lot of people are saying, you know, gift cards, you know, are a great idea. I know we're past time, so if people need to drop off. One organization that we did a virtual events course with is they actually went to local stores that have, you know, supported them throughout the years and said, you know, let's figure out a way to partner together. Like maybe they could give a 20% off coupon, and then that gets people into their store, into their restaurant, or you can promote, you know, if you're of a more local organization. So think about, you know, the people and your network, your community, you know, how can you all work together to help each other? Okay, so we see that people need to start dropping off. Ilissa, do you want to just let everybody know what you're going to be sending out after? I know people wanted the PowerPoint or...
Yeah, I will certainly send out the presentation that we went through. And you already have, but you will have our email addresses in case there's anything you need, any questions that pop up, any guidance you need. We're happy to help, so let us know.